Eswatini national anthem, and we will proceed with the program. Bayete, when Wapagati. Bayete, when Wapagati. We may be seated. Bayete, when Wapagati.
Asinibingelele Yemaswati lamahle sinemukele lapha ke MANDVULO Grand Hall ligama lami ngikhanyisile mabuza kanti ke lomuhla sengilo lilanga lelikhulu layo SACU Summit yesiphohlongo le banjelwe khona la eHeaven la kaNgwane sebafikile ke baholi babohulumende nemavele ehlukahlukene kufaka ekhathi iNingizimu Afrika njengoba mengameli Cyril Ramaphosa sekakhona lokusho kona ukuthi umsebenzi usotawucala khona manje madfutane kanti ke yona inhlangano yaka SACU ngiyinhlangano lebukwenza wate kuthengiselana kwawo mave lasihlanu kuyo ke yona ke Southern African Customs Union kanti ke ngakanzi kakhulu asivele singene kuwo umsebenzi.
At this time, Your Majesty, Excellencies, I would like to make formal introductions of all the heads of state that are in our midst here today. If you allow me and to manage our time, I will go through the whole list, and at the end of the list, we shall all appreciate them with a very strong round of applause. We are privileged to have in our midst His Majesty King Mswati III, the King of the Kingdom of Eswatini, who is the current chairman of SACU. Bayete, when Wapagati. We are also privileged to have in our midst His Excellency, the President of the Republic of South Africa, President Cyril Ramaphosa in our midst. It is also a privilege to acknowledge and recognize the presence of the Prime Minister of the Kingdom of Lesotho, His Excellency Sam Matekane. We are also happy to acknowledge the presence of the Prime Minister of Namibia, who is here representing the President of Namibia, Her Excellency Sarah Kugongelwa. We are also happy to recognize the presence of the Minister of Investments, Trade and Industry in Botswana, who is here representing the President of Botswana, who could not make it to this summit, Minister Musi Khafela. We would also love to recognize the presence of the new Executive Secretary of SACU, Mr. Thabo David Kasipe. Also to recognize the current chairman of the SACU Council of Ministers, the Minister of Finance in Eswatini, Minister Neil Reichenberg. Last but not least, to recognize the Prime Minister of the Kingdom of Eswatini, His Excellency Cleopas Dlamini. Some of the local protocol, you'll have to excuse me today because this is a SACU meeting, so please don't get offended if I don't mention you. Your Majesty, we have an ambitious program in front of us, and we will attempt to be very efficient in how we run this particular program. I've mentioned, Your Majesty, that we have a new Executive Secretary at SACU who has brought in a new vision and new energy and new thinking. I would like to, at this particular point in time, invite Mr. Kasipe to give us his view of where he wants to take SACU. Bayete, Wenwa Pagati, Your Excellencies.
Your Majesty, King Mswati III of the Kingdom of Eswatini and Chairperson of the SACU Summit, Your Excellency Cyril Matamela Ramaphosa, President of the Republic of South Africa, Right Honorable Sam Matekane, Prime Minister of the Kingdom of Lesotho, Right Honorable Sarah Kukengelwa Madila, Prime Minister of the Republic of Namibia, Honorable Musi Khafela, Minister of Trade, Republic of Botswana, Honorable Ministers and members of the SACU Council, Honorable members of Parliament in Eswatini present, Your Excellencies, members of the Diplomatic Corps, distinguished invited guests, members of the SACU Commission, officials of the SACU Secretariat, members of the media, ladies and gentlemen. Dumela, Sanbonani, good morning. Allow me to express my sincere appreciation to you, Your Majesty and Excellencies, for dedicating time today to SACU. It is indeed my honor and pleasure to be participating at this summit of the heads of state and of government. It's my first summit since my appointment and reporting for duty on the 1st of February 2023. I therefore extend a word of appreciation to our host, the government of the Kingdom of Eswatini, for the hospitality and excellent facilities accorded to all delegations. I also wish to extend a warm welcome to our guest speaker, Professor Ricardo Hausman of the Harvard University Economic Growth Lab, for honoring our invitation to speak on the theme, SACU Industrialization Opportunities through Improving Economic Complexity. I hope and believe that you will find the professor's talk very insightful and relevant to our 5-year strategy, which prioritizes industrialization of our SACU region with a specific focus on the development of regional value chains, export and investment promotion. As a recent graduate of the professor's Leading Economic Growth program, I believe he holds a powerful message for us all. Your Majesty, Your Excellencies, the summit comes at a time of a multiplicity of global challenges, marked by the lingering impact of COVID-19, climate change, and the Ukraine-Russia conflict. These challenges have resulted in some deleterious impacts, such as global inflation, which in turn has led to a cost of living crisis, food and energy security crisis. The Russia-Ukraine conflict, notably, has sparked what some have come to call global geo-economic fragmentation. Through this fragmentation, the world economy and along with it, investment and capital flow patterns are increasingly clustering along geopolitical lines. Notably, the emerging fragments of geopolitically aligned countries are characterized by alliances that look to leverage on their collective strength to advocate for their position at the global table, at which the cake of global capital, trade flows, and market access are being carved. Your Majesty, Your Excellencies, as these headwinds, the winds of change, blow, therein lies a great opportunity. To the candle, the wind means death. However, to the bushfire, the same wind is life. The choice that we have to face as the SACU family, therefore, is clear. Do we want to be the candle or the bushfire as the wind blows? This is not a trivial question, as it challenges us not to only be resilient to the global winds of change, but to actually seek to gain from these winds of change. For instance, climate change presents opportunities for green energy and sustainable food production within the SACU countries. Without us as SACU articulating our strategy and vision, we risk becoming vision of the other regional blocs. As the saying goes, if you are not at the table, you are on the menu. With the promise of the AFCFTA, we should bid farewell to the current reliance on the largely primary commodity pit-to-port value chains and low value added, low productivity, and therefore low income industrialization. Your Majesty, Your Excellencies, towards implementing our strategy, the summit was preceded by a series of, this summit was preceded by a series of meetings of SACU institutions, starting with the meetings of the Finance and Audit Committee, senior trade officials, SACU Commission, a SACU ministerial retreat, and the meetings of the Council of Ministers. These were held from the 23rd to the 28th June 2023. The objective of this 8th summit is to receive a report from the Council of Ministers on the progress attained towards the implementation of the SACU strategic plan, which was approved by the Council and endorsed by the summit in June 2022. You will recall that the strategic plan prioritizes industrialization as SACU's overarching objective, which will be attained through the development of regional value chains, investment attraction, and export promotion. Other core strategic pillars of the 5-year period strategy are trade facilitation and logistics, implementation and leveraging on the AFCFTA opportunities, trade relations, united engagement with SACU speaking in one voice, finance and resource mobilization, and lastly, but certainly not lastly, and indeed, in fact, even probably more important, the effectiveness of SACU institutions. Since the adoption of the strategic plan in 2022, I'm pleased to report that the Secretariat and the Member States have made good progress on implementation of the agreed priorities. The Chairperson of Council will provide a detailed progress report in the closed session. One of the key highlights of these achievements is the successful rollout of a regional accredited economic operator program. Basically, a red carpet treatment for tax and customs compliant businesses in the SACU region to expedite, ease, and reduce the cost of doing business for them in all the SACU countries. The customs administrations, represented by the Commissioners General, signed a memorandum of mutual recognition 2 weeks ago. And through this memorandum, one business that is accredited in any of the 5 member states is automatically accredited as literally a VIP, green lane, red carpet business, which will enjoy expedited transit and processing of the cargo as they cross the border. Be that as it may, one of the key lessons from the past 1 year, Your Excellencies, is that as we try and implement the strategy, it's getting very clear, as one Army General observed, no plan survives contact with the enemy. Mike Tyson, the boxer, puts it more colorfully by saying, everyone has a plan until they get punched in the face. Your Majesty, Your Excellencies, in trying to implement the strategy, we also received our punches in the face in the form of unanticipated challenges. Consequently, the Council of Ministers has had to hold a ministerial retreat in order to provide leadership and guidance on how SACU can continue to adapt to emerging risks. As I conclude, allow me at this point to convey my gratitude to His Majesty King Mswati III and indeed the entire summit for the leadership and guidance that the Secretariat has received during the Kingdom of Eswatini's term as Chair of SACU. I look forward to your continued support in that regard. Equally, I wish to express my deep appreciation and gratitude to the SACU Council of Ministers and the members of the SACU Commission for the support provided to the Secretariat. Under my leadership, I pledge the commitment of the SACU Secretariat staff to serve and support the member states and the SACU institutions to the best of our abilities, not as an end in itself, though, but towards bettering the lives of the citizens of our 5 member states. Finally, I also wish to thank all officials involved in organizing this event, as well as the officials from the SACU Secretariat for their splendid acumen, diligence, and commitment. I thank you for your attention.
Excellencies, I think we can all agree, you can all agree with me that the new Secretary General at SACU is a man of many ideas and many convictions, and brings a lot of energy which validates the optimism that we have not only in the African continent, but in SACU itself as we look at how we grapple with the challenges that we face today. Your Majesty, Your Excellencies, at this time, we just want to take a bit of time to unpack our theme for this summit. As articulated by the SG, the theme is SACU industrialization opportunities through improving economic complexity, by Professor Ricardo Hausman, founder and director of Harvard University's Growth Lab. With this, I'd like to invite Professor Hausman to the podium to unpack this theme. Baete Unopad.
Thank you very much. His Majesty, President Ramaphosa, the ministers, Prime Ministers of Namibia and Lesotho, Minister from Botswana, Secretary General, His Excellencies. It's really an honor and a pleasure to be with you today. I don't know if I will get the chance to have my presentation. But if not, let me start by thanking this opportunity to share with you a set of ideas. As I look at the SACU region, I find that there's been enormous progress in many dimensions of development. If I look at the gaps in life expectancy, in years of schooling, in urbanization, vis-a-vis, say, the United States, just to take it as a benchmark, the gaps have been narrowing in many dimensions of development. But when I look at income per capita, the gaps have been widening, have been moving in the wrong direction. So it's a little bit of a puzzle to ask the question, how could the foundations of development be converging, but income be diverging? And the answer has to do with the fact that there's a divergence of technology, that the gaps in technology are widening. So what could be behind this? So to understand this, we need to understand what technology is. And technology is really human knowledge that takes three forms. Human productive knowledge that we use to change the world. It takes the form of embodied knowledge in tools. It takes the form of codified knowledge in codes, recipes, formulas, algorithms, how to do manuals. But if this was all that technology was, technology would flow very quickly because you would put the tools on containers and you would put the codes on the web and share them. But if you ask yourself, what do you do when your tooth hurts? You don't download an article from the web and ask a friend to follow the instructions. You go to a dentist, and the dentist uses tools, the dentist follows protocols, but the dentist mixes the tools and the protocols with something in his head or her head that allows her or him to see things we wouldn't see and to use his or her hands in ways we would not know how to do that. And that thing is something we call know-how. And know-how resides in brains and only in brains. So know-how is the ability to perform attacks. So here you have Lucas Radebe doing his thing. Now, if you have a conversation with Lucas, I can guarantee you that your football game will not improve. So know-how is not information. It's a skill that takes a long time to acquire in the brain. Malcolm Gladwell says it takes 10,000 hours to become good at something. And what matters for production is not individual know-how, it is collective know-how, is that know-how of doing things that can only be done in teams. So it would be inappropriate to say that this lady knows how to implement this technology. This technology requires all these other people who have complementary forms of know-how that all have to come together to implement the technology. So in some sense, technologies are a little bit like symphonic orchestras. Each one has to bring in a separate skill, and the output is some combination of those skills. So you can ask yourself the question, how much know-how does a product require? Now here you have a butcher, a baker, a candlestick maker. These could all be family businesses. These products cannot be made in a family. These products require too much knowledge to be made by small groups. And you can say that this product cannot be even made by a country. This is the Boeing 787. It is made by all of these companies through all of these countries because the know-how necessary to make the turbines is very different from the landing gear, is very different from the avionics or the windows. So societies acquire more knowledge, not because everybody becomes a genius, but because everybody learns something different. And the whole knows more because the parts know different. So this gives me an idea of what I like to call the Scrabble theory of development. That in order for society to know more, you need to put different bits of knowledge in different heads. And that makes that production is a little bit like playing a game of Scrabble, where these bits of know-how, these productive capabilities are like letters and products are like words. So if you only have one letter, there aren't too many words that you can put together. But if I give you these 3 letters, now you can make these 4 words and you can make 3-letter words. If I give you this 4 letters, now you can make 9 words and you can make 4-letter words. If I give you these 10 letters, Now you can make 595 words and that are up to 10 letters long. So the more letters you have, the more products you can put together, and the longer the products that you can, the more complex the products that you can put together. So the way I think of the world is I think that the countries or regions or provinces have letters. These letters go into making words. So when you look at a country and ask what things do they make? Well, the ones that have a lot of letters can make many words. They're more diversified. The one that has very few letters, like the one at the bottom, can only make one product. Products that require a lot of letters, words that are very long, are made in few places. So things that are hard to make are made in few places, and things that are easy to make are made in many places. So when we look at the world and ask ourselves, how many products do you make, and how hard it is to make the products that you make, that is, how many other countries are able to make the things that you make, we get this relationship where the rich countries are all at the bottom right. They make many things, and things that are made in few countries, things that are hard to make. And poorer countries are at the top left. They make few things and things that many people know how to make. So this is not only true at the level of countries, this is also true at the level of municipalities. These are South African municipalities, and some municipalities have more letters, they make more things and more complicated things. And so we extracted a way of measuring how many letters countries have, and we find that the more letters you have, the richer you are. So the question, not only that, here we divide all the countries in the world into quintiles of how fast they grow. So the top quintile is the one that grew the most since 1990, and the bottom quintile is the one that grew the less. That's what you have on your left. What you have on your right is how much did countries increase their letters. And what you see here is that really only 1/5 of the countries of the world narrowed the gap with the US. That's the yellow line. And those are the countries that increased their complexity. That's the yellow line on the right. So the secret of growth is technological catch-up, which means accumulating capabilities, which means transforming the things you're able to produce. Now, unfortunately, when we look at the economic rankings of the SACU countries, they've been heading in the wrong direction. Okay, so that's what we think we need to reverse. So the question then becomes how to acquire more letters. And to acquire more letters, you have to face this chicken and egg problem. Diversification means, diversification means that you are going to start doing things you were not doing before. But the things that you weren't doing before are typically things you don't know how to do. So how do you start doing things that you don't know how to do? If to do them, you need to know how to do them. How do you become a watchmaker? How do you make watches without watchmakers? But how do you become a watchmaker in a place that doesn't make watches? Anyway, so I had here a question for you. I had a bear, a lion, and a zebra, and I wanted you to think which of the two products, which are the two animals, a bear, a lion, and the zebra, are more like each other, and which one is more different. So think a bear, a lion, and a zebra. And you might say, well, the bear and the lion don't eat grass, the zebra eats grass, or you can say the bear and the zebra are from Africa. But if you take the Scrabble theory, you would say a zebra is just a bear with an extra Z. If you want to go from bear to zebra, just get a Z and then you can write a zebra. But if you want to go from bear to lion, you have 4 letters that you don't need, and you need 4 letters that you don't have. So the idea is that the way countries acquire more capabilities is by moving from the things they know how to do to things that are nearby in this letter space. Unfortunately, we have some technological problems. We have been able to map what this letter space looks like and what things are near you, and we're able to locate all the countries in SACU in this space to know what they have and what's near them, okay? I don't know if the technology will recover us, but I guess we're not in luck today. So I have here a set of strategies that I'm suggesting that SACU follows. The first strategy is related to move towards your adjacent possible. Moving to adjacent possible means moving from bear to zebra, moving to the next thing. Now, it has been a very dominant idea in this continent that beneficiation is sort of like the way to think about it. That you're producing a lot of raw materials, and that what you need to do is to focus on adding value to your raw materials. I think that adding value to raw materials is often a good idea, but it's a very narrow view of your opportunity set. Your opportunity set is much larger, because you don't need to rely on your raw materials. Raw materials are as far as the nearest port. That's what value chains are about. That you need, you are a node in a chain and some other people are doing other things. You do not need to rely solely on the things that are based on your raw materials. Your raw materials are only an advantage in that you can save transportation costs. And the question is, how large are these transportation costs? Well, for wood, transportation costs are large, but for diamonds, they're not. So now, one way to think about beneficiation is to ask yourself, how did Finland become rich? So Finland had a lot of trees. So you would say, well, add value to your raw materials, cut your trees and sell wood, or process the wood and make paper, or process the wood and make furniture. And that's adding value to your raw materials. But what also happened in Finland is that they were chopping wood, and in the process of chopping wood, they became good at tools and machines that cut wood. And from tools and machines that cut wood, they moved to tools and machines that cut other things, because not everything in the world is made out of wood. And from tools that cut, in general, they went to automated tools that cut, because doing things in an automated way might be an improvement. And from automated tools that cut, they went to automated tools, because there's more to life than cutting. And from automated tools, they made it to Nokia. So this alternative path is not about adding value to your raw material. It's about adding capabilities to your capabilities. It's being able to do more things given the things now you know how to do. And that opens up a whole set of things. You're not going to get to cell phones by adding value to raw materials. Cell phones require too many things. Adding value to raw materials focuses you only on very narrow value chains that have one dominant input. But most of production has many inputs. Some of them you will have, others you'll have to bring in. So in this space, we have tried to map all the set of possibilities that you could follow. So in our mind, it's very important to explore your adjacent possible. If there's some advantage on your raw materials, by all means exploit it, but you have many more options than that. The second idea that I want you to explore is the idea that the more letters you have, the more things you can put together. It's important that you're able to mix the letters in SACU. SACU has more letters than any individual country in SACU. There's more opportunity to do things if you allow those letters to move. And for example, I would put a lot of emphasis in the ease of movement of labor within SACU, especially skilled labor. It's very important that you're able to tap on the talent of the whole. That increases the set of opportunities that appear. The third idea is that you want to bring letters in. The secret of Silicon Valley is not that Americans are geniuses or that California has very good universities. It is that 54% of the workers in Silicon Valley are foreigners. And the other 46 are not Californians, even though California is a state that has 40 million people. Californians only make 18% of Silicon Valley. So the secret is the ability to attract talent, to complement the knowledge you have with knowledge you may not yet have, but you will soon have if you let the knowledge in. So being competitive in immigration policy is key to being able to absorb technology. Foreigners are complements, not substitutes of locals, especially foreigners with talent. They generate more jobs, they don't take away jobs. So opening up and becoming competitive in talent. Britain just announced last year that if you have a degree from a top university, you'll get a work visa without a job. So students at Harvard, if they want, they can go work in London. It's up to them. So that's an example of what countries do to be able to tap on the talent that will bring in the technology that will allow them to transform themselves. The fourth idea I would like to share with you is that the world is undergoing an energy transition. Now, this region has been very rich in coal. Coal has allowed it to develop comparative advantage in cheap electricity, and cheap electricity allowed for the manufacturing of things that were sold to the world. One of the graphs I was going to show you is the electricity intensity of the export basket of SACU. And the electricity intensity of the export basket of SACU is in the 85th percentile of the world. You have a basket of exports that's very intensive in electricity. But your electricity sector has gotten into trouble. And that's one of the reasons why you have had such a drastic deindustrialization in your employment. So obviously you need to fix your electricity crisis, but you also need to think about the demand for products in the future, which will be dependent on your ability to generate probably cheap but clean electricity. And here I would like to mention a way to think about the energy transition, which I think is different from the standard one. In the standard one, what the Paris Accord says is that the world needs to lower its emissions. For the world to lower its emissions, every country needs to lower its emissions. And what are you going to do to lower your emissions? And look at all your coal-fired power plants. What are you going to do to shut them down? So that's sort of like the dominant discourse. In the alternative discourse, the world needs to lower its emissions. For the world to lower its emissions, the world is going to need a lot of things that will enable them to lower their emissions. To lower your emissions, you need to electrify everything that can be electrified, like cars. You need to make that electricity in clean ways, so you'll need solar, wind, nuclear, hydro, whatever, right? And for that, you will need solar panels, you'll need windmills, etc. You will need to change the way manufacturing processes are done. So a lot of things need to happen for the world to be able to lower its emissions. They will need a lot of stuff. Who is going to make that stuff? So I see that the dynamics of the Paris Accord are a bit encouraging the world to decarbonize, increasing the demand for decarbonization. But who is going to supply the means of decarbonization? And I say that this region has a role to play that is important. And I delineate two strategies. The first one is make the things that the world will need to lower its emissions. And that means to lower its emissions, the world will need a lot of metals. And the world will need a lot of metals, and metals come from minerals, and minerals come from mining. There cannot be an energy transition without a mining boom. And that mining boom will need to have a lot of critical minerals in it, okay? And those critical minerals are in this region. Not only do you have chromium and the platinum group metals and in South Africa, you now have discovery of lithium, and you have rare earths in Namibia, and so on. So you have a lot of minerals, and then you can, add value to those raw materials, try to participate in the value chains that are going to make the world. So there is a set of industries and value chains in which you can participate, not to substitute your small domestic markets, but to provide the world with a means of decarbonization. So that's strategy number one. Strategy number two is so in strategy number one, I would participate in the mining boom, think about the transformation from internal combustion engines to electric vehicles, think of batteries, think of battery storage for grid-scale battery storage with your minerals, think of value chains and other things like fuel cells, electrolyzers. There's a lot of stuff in which you can be participating, looking at the world as your destination. The second idea is to make green versions of gray products yourselves, okay? As the world will try to decarbonize, it will need to use green energy. Now, green energy is fundamentally different from oil because oil made the world energetically flat. Oil and coal are incredibly dense in energy from the point of view of weight and volume. That made them incredibly cheap to transport. So if a barrel of oil cost $80 in Saudi Arabia, it would cost $82 in Japan. So if you wanted to make energy-intensive products, you just import the energy. Energy availability did not become a determinant of comparative advantage. So you have exporters of steel, like China, South Korea, Germany, Belgium, being major importers of oil. In a world of clean energy, this is not going to be the case. It's already not the case with natural gas. The price of natural gas doesn't have the law of one price because it's very, very costly to transport natural gas. You have to put it in, have to liquefy it, for which you waste more than half the energy in the gas to make it liquid, and then to transport is much more expensive. So as a consequence, the price of natural gas differs radically between, say, the US and Europe. And that means that energy-intensive industries in Europe are becoming uncompetitive. They need to go to find ways to produce in places that have cheaper energy. Now, hydrogen is even harder to transport. So what I think is going to happen is that it's not that Europe is going to import all of its energy needs. It's that the energy-intensive industries of Europe will have to move to places that have cheap sources of green energy. And that can be your new source of comparative advantage, okay? So in some sense, we're going back to a world before oil, when manufacturing plants had to locate near their energy source. So, historically, this plant was next to the river because it could put a water wheel in the river. And windmills were factories where the factory was inside the windmill that would use the energy that would come from the wind, right there where it hit. Or this aluminum smelter in Norway is located next to the hydro dam because it's using the energy right where it hits. So the strategy is to leverage the region's solar, wind, and water assets to benefit from the global relocation of energy-intensive industries. Energy-intensive industries will have to relocate. Where are they going to go? They'll have to go to places that become competitive in green energy. So to do that, I suggest that you adopt a strategy of developing green industrial parks. So it will be plug and play for manufacturing producers that if they use that energy there, they are assured that that energy is clean. You need to develop storage resources, and I think that SACU, if you start thinking of SACU as a region, you would start thinking, well, where can we store energy? Well, we can store it in the highlands of Lesotho. But the highlands of Lesotho are not going to develop pump storage for their own needs. They would develop pump storage to stabilize a lot of renewable energy in the rest of the grid so that you can have solar energy at night by storing it in the highlands and using it at night. So you want to think of the Lesotho highlands in the context of the energy system of SACU, not in terms of the energy needs of Lesotho. And that would allow for other investments of that kind. You want to reduce the cost of capital because the cost of capital is a fundamental determinant of price in these capital-intensive industries. So you really want to work on your macro sustainability, on your sovereign risk, on fiscal consolidation. You want to become efficient at installing capacity. You want to really figure out a way in which an installed capacity of 1 kilowatt hour, 1 megawatt hour of capacity can be installed cheaply and efficiently, because your competitive advantage will depend on that. And then you will attract industries that will try to decarbonize. And you'll probably start, by the way, to do this, you don't need to quickly decarbonize the rest of your grid. You're going to separate stuff. You're going to have a green park, and you will be decarbonizing the rest of the system according to your national determined contributions. So you follow your national determined contributions in the rest of the system, but you carve out some space where manufacturing activity can grow with green energy, and that will incentivize the generation of additional green energy to supply those needs. That's a vision. In my mind, that vision is becoming realized in Namibia at a fast pace, because Namibia has just agreed with Hyphen on a major super project to generate solar energy. They're thinking green hydrogen, green ammonia. But that model will probably show that cheap energy can be produced here, and maybe next to it you can have a green park, and many things can happen, and the Namibians are thinking a lot about it. So I think that maybe green ammonia will come out of Namibia if all things go well, and green steel could be coming out of South Africa if this vision is realized. And green steel that would use green electricity plus green hydrogen in the process of production. I wanted to say also that it's very important for SACU to exploit the African market. We looked at, and let me see if I can get back to that graph. We looked at the exports of SACU to Africa and the exports of SACU to the world. And what we find is that the exports of SACU to the world are mostly primary goods. The exports of SACU to Africa are much more sophisticated. And as a consequence, the African market, here you have the exports of SACU to the world on the left and to Africa to the right. You see it's much more diversified, containing many more complex goods. So it is important to increase complexity, as a strategy to increase complexity, to deepen your participation in the African continent free trade area. Let me stop there. I tried to share some ideas with you. I'm optimistic about the region. I think that there is a path forward, and we need to use the waves that we have to surf forward, and I think there are some positive waves that you can exploit. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Hausman. Profound apologies for those technological glitches. We shall ensure that this presentation is made available to all participants because we lost a little bit of the content when we had to deal with those technological glitches. President Ramaphosa, we can assure you this had nothing to do with load shedding. some of my colleagues think that may be a career-limiting move. Your Majesty, Your Excellencies, one of the golden moments I had last week as I was catching up on global affairs was this great meeting that was held in France, where world leaders, including African leaders, had met under the new Global Financing Pact Summit, where we were listening to the latest thinking in terms of how the world looks at funding economic development globally. It was a golden moment for me because one of the African leaders spoke very eloquently and very affirmatively and told the rest of the world, we in Africa are not beggars, treat us as equals. That was President Ramaphosa. It is an honor and a privilege for me to have to invite President Cyril Ramaphosa to give us his address at this SACU summit. Your Excellency.
Your Majesty, heads of states and government gathered here, the Executive Secretary of SACU, members of the SACU Secretariat, members of Parliament present here, ministers and deputy ministers in our presence, officials and ladies and gentlemen, and also welcoming Professor Ricardo Hausmann for his most inspiring and forward-looking speech and input about the prospects of our region in SACU. Thank you very much for those wonderful words. Program Director, your reference to the technological glitches that we experienced and assuring us that it's not linked to load shedding was wonderful, but it hurt a little bit. Your Majesty and ladies and gentlemen, we are meeting at a time when many seismic shifts are taking place in the global economy. Just as countries were beginning to recover in the aftermath of COVID-19, the global economy was further and has been further weakened by the Russia-Ukraine conflict and the geopolitical contestation that is underway. As the UN Conference on Trade and Development noted earlier this year, food and energy crises, surging inflation, debt tightening, and the climate emergency are all contributing to one of the lowest rates of global economic growth in decades. As the Southern African Customs Union, it is critical that we fulfill our mandate if we are indeed to withstand these global shocks and mitigate their impact on our respective countries. And Professor Hausman's input should give us guidance and inspiration to do precisely that. Our union, that is SACU, is the oldest customs union in the world, having been founded in 1910. The SACU agreement has undergone several changes and improvements over the years to better reflect the prevailing political and economic environment in which we live in. We have always been deliberate about using this union as a vehicle for advancing and deepening integration amongst our nations. We are working to achieve this integration through cooperation in trade and industrial policies. We seek to build cross-border value chains amongst all SACU member states, and that this should be underpinned by regional infrastructure programs. The question for us is, to what extent have we been successful in this regard? And is SACU still fit for purpose and able to respond effectively to the needs of member countries? The geopolitical and economic shifts that are taking place across the world do necessitate that we must be quite intentional about what we hope to achieve as SACU. And it is in this regard, Your Majesty and heads of government and state, that Professor Hausman's words should land on fertile ears, because they are quite instructive about what the future could portend for our union, and indeed for our region, the Southern African Development Community. We must be quite deliberate when it comes to playing a developmental role in the region, on the continent, as well as globally. At the recent summit for a new global financing pact in Paris, as referred to by the program director, as Africa, it was not one voice, it was a number of voices, and we as Africans spoke with one voice, but same message about the need for industrialized countries to meet their commitments to developing country economies. Nearly all countries present agreed on the need for the reform of the multilateral development and financial institutions. Some of these institutions, like the Bretton Woods institutions, were established post the Second World War, when many of our countries were neither independent nor free. Ultimately, we strive for a world order that accommodates developing economy countries by having rules in respect of access to capital, respect of sovereignty, and the right to ratify our economies. Professor Hausman cites a wonderful example about capabilities that we need to develop, such as, and the example he gives is the aeroplane, either the 380 aeroplane, the 747, or the Airbus. And as you look at all its component parts, you'll find that these are not made by one company. They are made by a number of companies, and in other instances, they are also made up in a number of countries that cooperate and bring together all those letters that he was talking about, accumulate more and more letters, and be able to make something that is wholesome, which I do believe that our union, as SACU, can live up to, where we all work together and use the capabilities that we have. And it's wonderful that he cites the new emerging economies or technologies that are coming through in Southern Africa, in our region, particularly in our union, like in Namibia and a number of our other countries when it comes to green energy. It will also enable us to take advantage of opportunities opened up by the African Continental Free Trade Area. For this to happen, we should prioritize economic infrastructure, especially scaling up renewable energy capacity, our roads, our railways, ports, airports, telecommunications, and water infrastructure. We must discuss what we can do to diversify our economies, what we should do to increase intra-Africa trade and deepen integration. We are well positioned, Your Majesty, heads of state and government, to use our collective revenues to support industrial capacity and infrastructure development within the SACU Union. We cannot be content that Africa's share in global trade is a mere 3%. This customs union should contribute to substantially increase African trade in goods and services. We will achieve this if we have clearly articulated programs, clearly articulated initiatives, if we have and utilize our resources, and we have a robust governance framework and a commitment to execute our strategic plan. And I do think we can live up to this if, as SACU, we continue to serve as an important instrument for deepening African economic integration, as we strive to develop our economies, as well as to advance mutual prosperity and leave no one behind in our region. I thank you and have a good conference.
It plays a major role in development of our respective countries. We are pleased that we are here. We are currently experiencing positive developments in the collection of SACU receipts, which will contribute immensely to the social and economic development of our countries. As Eswatini, we are happy that during our chairmanship, all member states realized a windfall in our SACU receipts. We need to maintain these positive results and standards to increase the returns even more. The country's receipts increased by a significant share of 102% when compared to the previous year. It is the first time seeing such high returns. Contributing to this positive growth was the higher than projected outturn of the 2021-22 common revenue pool, together with the 25% increase in the projected size of the CRP for 2023-24 compared to 2022 to 2023 financial year. The increase in Eswatini's share of total intra-SACU imports from 9.6% in the revenue sharing framework for 2022 to 2023 23 to 10.8% in 2023 to 2024 was also a contributing factor. Indeed, the measures that our Minister of Finance has been implementing in order to enhance intra-SACU imports have started paying off. This has come about regardless of the difficulties faced by our economies brought about by global challenges such as the COVID-19 pandemic. We are also delighted to see the tremendous work that has been done under the Trade Facilitation Program, which will advance the SACU regional integration agenda. The launch of the Authorized Economic Operators Program in the various SACU member states marks a greater milestone. As SACU member states, we should work towards seamlessly borders where goods move from one country to another without delays at our points of entry. The program also helped to fast-track controls and reduction in administration costs for customs clearance. We anticipate seeing fewer delays in shipments, reduced theft and losses of goods, just to mention a few. As Eswatini, we are very pleased with such developments and thank all those who were responsible for carrying out the new architecture of declaring of goods at point of entry. This has come at an opportunity time when the continent is working towards trading under one umbrella of the African Continental Free Trade Area. The positive implementation of this initiative to make it more effective needs programs that can be as successful as SACU. We do realize that the vehicles of trade such as SACU were not built in one day, but we trust that they will be developed gradually, leading to a day when we can all say Africa is now trading effectively. We also need to bring forth and share other success stories under SACU to motivate best practices that can be adopted by the AFCFTA to boost intra-Africa trade. The SACU success story follows on the footsteps of ending HIV/AIDS. Your Excellencies, we are here to deliberate on key issues concerning SACU with a view to providing the necessary political and strategic guidance to our institution. We have seen this organization grow from strength to strength, moving in the right direction. As members, we have an obligation to nurture this child of ours, and where there are challenges, we need to sit down and find amicable solutions. This is particularly important at this time as SACU works on the implementation of its recently approved strategic plan 2022-2027 in the midst of the recent global developments which are having a significant impact on our economies. In our last summit, we reflected on how the COVID-19 pandemic had drastically changed our lives. The conflict between Russia and Ukraine had started, and we were at that stage already experiencing its impact. Opportunity to commend the African Leaders Initiative led by South African President Cyril Ramaphosa to broker peace in Russia-Ukraine conflict. As SACU leaders, we align ourselves with these efforts and extend our full support as we believe that it will bring about meaningful and lasting peace. Your Excellencies, in view of the global outlook and risks, SACU as a region needs to assess and reflect on this risk and on how best to effectively manage and mitigate against them to elicit opportunities for action and collaboration. We will engage and deliberate further on these emerging global developments and their impact on the SACU economies during our summit. In the midst of competing regional arrangements, SACU needs to step forward and as enshrined in the SACU mission to serve as an engine for regional integration and development, industrial and economic diversification, the expansion of intra-regional trade and investment and global competitiveness. In conclusion, we urge all delegates to be focused on the growth and sustainability of SACU by finding other ways of improving this facility by promoting increased trade. As member countries, we need to encourage regional value chains across various sectors, such as in vehicle manufacturing, where the production of different components of a vehicle can be distributed across several member countries and assembled in one. This will add impetus to our regional goal of integration while enhancing our trade output and growing the SACU pool. Let us use the current momentum to develop SACU and ensure that the pool grows for the benefit of our economies for future generations. As member countries, we all need to play our part for a sustainable future of our institution. We appreciate the support and cooperation that has been rendered to the Kingdom of Eswatini during our term as the chair of the institution of SACU. We will equally continue supporting all its planned initiatives after our term ends. We congratulate the Executive Secretary for assuming his new position, and we are confident that he will steer our organization to greater heights. Your Excellencies and distinguished delegates, we hope you have already experienced the true Eswatini hospitality since your arrival and enjoyed your time at the different places of tourism interest in the kingdom. Your Excellency, I now have the singular honor to declare the 8th Summit of the SACU Heads of State and Government officially open and wish you successful and enriching deliberations. I thank you. May God Almighty bless us all. Siyabonga.
When we're pagat, we may be seated. Your Majesty, Your Excellencies, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, this brings us to the close of the opening session, and I have 3 key announcements to make, which will give us direction in terms of what happens next. The first is we will immediately move into the closed session where heads of state and heads of government plus 6 members of their delegation who have been designated for this session will move to the closed session venue towards my right through the passage. The ushers will direct us appropriately. If you are not sure whether you're in the closed session or not, it means you are not. Just to make it the right Honorable Prime Minister of the Kingdom of Lesotho, Prime Minister Sam Matekane, and at that stage, when he makes those remarks and passes his vote of thanks, the ushers will direct the media to the closed session, and thereafter there will be a media briefing that will be done by the Chairperson of Council, Minister Reichenberg, together with the Executive Secretary of SACU, Mr. Kasipe. So you will not be left out. You will get a full dose of how the sessions progressed. The last announcement I'd like to make before we officially close the session relates to food. We will encourage that we all step out of the main hall. There will be light refreshments served because the closed session will be not a long one. We believe it will take less than an hour. Before you finish your light snacks, lunch will be served. In Siswati, we always say, Ingosi pegile bengnene. Bye. We therefore would like to request the room to rise to its feet, and we allow the heads of state and government to leave first, together with those that will attend the closed session. Baite, Wemapagati.
Ngalo-ke amasadla amahle sasifika emaphethelweni awo-ke umsebenzi wokuvula ngalokusemthethweni kwe-SACU Summit yeminyaka wa-2023. Ngiyethemba ukuthi kuvakele konke lokukhulunyiwe nginto-ke tikhulumi letfaka khathi silo semhlaba lesinguye-ke sihlalo wayo inhlangano yaka-SACU. Naye-ke mengameli welive laseNingizimu Afrika Cyril Ramaphosa, ikakhulu naye-ke Professor Houseman lochamuka lapha e-Harvard University lovetile ukuthi uma-ke lamave la ngemalunga ayo ye-SACU angahlanganisa imicondvo kanye-ke naloko lokukhona phecelezi ama-resources bangakwati kukhicita lokukhulu bese bakha imali lenyenti. Sithemba ukuthi nikuthokozele kubukela nisaleni kahle.
Nice to see you. How are you? Eyes are warm. Likewise. Welcome, Excellency. That didn't
I'm the only neighbor.
Ke di dumela ntate.
Le kae?
Se di tla le kae?
Re pele.
Go tsamaile hantle.
Sa ya hantle haholo.
Ra leboha.
Ra leboha.
Ya, ra leboha. Ra leboha.
Why did I miss you? See? I shouldn't be attracted. This is terrible. Please don't ever hold it against me.
Hey,